welcome to the A220. What are we going to be looking at in today's video? Well, first of all, we're going to take a look at the history of the A220. Then we're going to be taking a look around KPVD, do a quick walk around, look at all the things that make this aircraft super cool, super unique, and there are a lot of them to go through there. Then we're going to be in flight and sort of do a little bit of a test flight. So we're going to be looking at the fly-by-wire, some of the systems that the aircraft's got that are quite unique to it, and just a general discussion of that while flying around. Then we're going to come back, do an approach to landing while focusing on how to land the A220 and all the things that come with that, because it is quite a unique aircraft in that perspective, but we'll come to that later. Then we're going to be taking a look at the EFB, an overview, and the terrain radar and how to use it. So without further ado, let's get into the history. Okay, now the history on the A220 is pretty interesting. Even though it's a relatively new aircraft. The program first started called the BRJ-X in 1996. This was a sort of a study and an idea from Bombardier to see what could they make an aircraft that's bigger than their current lineup. Rather than actually going ahead with this program, they stretched the CRJ, so that's why you end up with the CRJ 900, and they shelved that idea in the 2000s. From that, in 2004, came a feasibility study to think like, can we make a bigger aircraft? And they thought they could. So they went ahead with it and started development on the CSeries. So it was called the Bombardier CSeries program at this time. Now that was launched in 2008. And if you don't know Bombardier, they are a pretty big company. They brought you such aircraft as mentioned like the CRJ-8, Challenger series, and some of the water bombers and many, many others. So what were the goals for the CSeries program? The goals were to create an efficient, comfortable, reliable airliner that can fit into the market segment that's just below, say, the smaller 737s, the A319, 18, and the Embraers. That was their goal, and they wanted to save 20% on the fuel burn compared to these legacy aircraft. How are they going to do this? Well, they did this by using new generation engines, along with about 45% composite, so a lot of composite used in the aircraft, and a clever use of materials throughout the aircraft in general. That's kind of why when you look, at least when I look at a C-Series or an A220, it has that next generation look. To me, it looks like a mini 350. And did they achieve this? Well, they absolutely knocked it out the park. They achieved that 20% fuel burn advantage and even 8% more efficient than a 737 MAX. And during the test flight campaign, it turns out the aircraft was more efficient than they thought it was going to be. So from a technical perspective, the program was a runaway success. Now this is where things start to take a bit of a turn for the worse for the program. This program had obviously cost a huge amount of money. There had been an estimate that it was going to cost something like $2.1 billion, but it had already cost $3.5 billion, and the price was rising and rising, and there was governments involved and subsidies and backings, and it all got a bit messy really. And then that's where Airbus stepped in 2018 and became a majority shareholder and bought the program, rebranding it to the A220. So that's why we know it as the A220, but realistically it still is a C-Series but rebranded. And they are doing work to improve the aircraft over time, but at its core it isn't actually an Airbus. That's something to really get your head around right now before we continue into the video. On top of this, there were some issues with the engines on the A220, only available with the Pratt & Whitney geared turbofan, the PW1500G. Now it was marred with quite a few instances of engine failures, some of them uncontained, some of them contained, and corrosion issues, compressor stalls, things like this. Now these issues have all been solved now, interestingly, in software, and some of those have been captured in the 220, so we'll take a look at those in the sim later on, but they've now sorted them out and it's kind of clean sailing from now on, and the program has got 1,100 orders with over 570 aircraft delivered. So it's fair to say the program has been a massive success and continues to grow from strength to strength. So let's jump into the sim and take a look at the aircraft. Okay, welcome to our first look at the 220 on stand here in Providence. Now, first thing that really strikes me is the profile of the nose. Now, it really gives me that next generation modern looking aircraft and really makes it stand out. some people, and I've heard this from quite a few people, think that A220 is pretty ugly. I am definitely not one of those people. I think it's a really good looking aircraft, actually. When I've seen them around in real life as well, I always go, oh, nice, a 220. And it really has a, I don't know, a futuristic look to it. Let's get a bit close to this nose. Now, just look at that. That profile coming down, giving that sort of more aerodynamic burn than the older style aircraft. And let's just get really close up to it. Look at the quality on this. Now, as mentioned before, it is only 45-ish% composites. Here we can see some of the rivet lines, so this isn't a composite section of the aircraft, and you can see that as it goes along. But as you can see, look, just as close as we can get up there, everything's decaled, everything looks fantastic. Really, 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 really cool. Coming back here gives you a bit more of that view of the profile of the 220, where you've got that sort of, I don't know how to describe it. It's just a cool look, really. Now, coming to the front, we've got nose landing gear. Smaller tyres than you might expect, but again, really, really high quality stuff. You can see into here, we've even got some of the decals on the doors, the landing and takeoff lights here as well, with all the associated warning labels that you would get on other aircraft. Now, we are in a Breeze livery today. That's because they operate from Providence, so we're kind of trying to keep it as realistic as possible. But I do think it really shows off the 220's profile pretty well as well. Here we go with the forward door one right. We've got the cargo door here as well. As you can see, it really has that essence of it's a proper aircraft. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, what I mean by that is, I'm not saying the CRJ or the Dash or anything like that are not proper planes. They are, of course, proper planes. But this is a big size airliner. This is anything that Airbus could do, hence why they purchased the program. They thought it was good as well, and it just really gives that vibe when you go around. Now let's take a look at this. This is the Pratt & Whitney geared turbofans that we talked about earlier. Now you can often tell an aircraft that's equipped with these engines because here they normally have this sort of green markation section here, and it's obviously normally pretty obvious that that is a Pratt & Whitney equipped aircraft. All 220s come with this, so it's going to obviously always be that. But it's a fascinating engine. Now, what we can do is we can pop the cowlings open. So off we go, and the latches go in place. And we can take a look at some of the extra details that go on in the side of here with the fadex and everything else along the side there. And you can just peek in through there as well. Just looking absolutely brilliant. Now, what are some of the cool things about this engine? We already mentioned that it basically has a gearbox inside of it, but what does that do? Let's talk a little bit more about that. If you imagine on your car, you're not going to want to put your car in third gear and drive. That's not going to be the most efficient speed for your vehicle to go at all time. Now, normally with a standard jet engine, you kind of are spinning the N2. So this is the stage that's in the middle of the engine. So if we look down here, you can see the core. So the N2 is kind of, oh, it's difficult to say, but like here-ish, something like that. You're spinning that at a pretty high speed, and then you're taking a shaft and you're spinning the front of the engine, the N1, at a ratio of that speed. And that's kind of just, you just accept with what you've got. Here we have a gearbox that actually reduces the speed of the disc at the front, or vice versa. You can say you can run the engine slower or faster or whatever, and that gives you that extra efficiency. Now that's complicated, really complicated, and cost Pratt & Whitney $10 billion. So multiple times the amount that the entire 220 cost to get that working. And it has had issues in service, as we mentioned earlier, but it's getting there now reliability wise, and it truly is a next generation engine. Again, just focus on the detail. Look at this. I love this. See how you can see the rivets coming on the pylon, right? And you can see how someone's screwed them in, and then it's created these indents here. It looks brilliant. Don't know what else to say, really. Wings wise, pretty thin wings. You can see at the end, you've got, I don't know what you would officially call this. It is a winglet. It's not a raked wingtip fence or anything like that, but it's pretty big winglet. And you can see the lights up in there with the system 1 and 2 as well. Coming back down here, landing gear bay, pretty clean bay actually. You know, you've got a sort of a liner. You know, normally if you poke your head inside a 737, it looks like every hydraulic line known to man is in there. They've kind of hidden it, and I actually say it's pretty neat, to be honest. You know, you've got it as it closes up and goes into the wheel bay. Now, can you see the reason for this, right? We have kind of got a pseudo, I would call it pseudo, like A320/737 thing going on here, where it's going to go up into the bay and then aerodynamically seal as this drops down, but there's no enormous doors like you have on a 320. Again, weight saving, smart design, but slightly its own unique thing. Come back here, November registered aircraft, obviously. Delta are also a very, very large operator of the A220, and they're putting a lot of faith into it because there's more orders coming for a lot of these North American, Asian, European carriers that are coming from all over the place. Now, I want to focus on the back here because there's an interesting quirk. So this is the APU. Now this to me looks like a 777 style back. You know, you normally on an Airbus, a normal Airbus, an A320, you kind of have the straight back, and then it goes like that, and then it curves down. Whereas this is curving down and curving down as well. So you've got the APU here, but the APU inlet is over here, also like on a Boeing. So when you're in flight, it's going to pop up, and actually that's where the air comes in for the aircraft. And actually, if you do run it in flight, it apparently creates a fair bit of drag, which is interesting. And another sort of feature that you can really see here, this is quite prominent from this view, look how comically big the windows are. And that's something I've noticed when I've flown as a passenger on the aircraft, is you've just got loads of light in the cabin, loads of space, loads of light, and it's got some of the absolute biggest windows available on these generation of aircraft. Nothing more to see on this side other than it is obviously fully symmetrical, but we can look inside the engine again here, looking at the core and taking a look at that Pratt & Whitney engine once again. So that was a pretty quick tour of the exterior of the 220. We're going to now jump inside, take a look at the flight deck, get some of the aircraft going, and take a look at the systems.
Hey everyone, in this portion of the Welcome to video, we'll be going over the systems and avionics of the A220. So we're going to be doing a circuit flight over Dubrovnik, Lima Delta Delta uniform, in the Synaptic A220 in the Swiss livery. We're going to be going over the operations, cockpit workflows, and also a little deep dive into what we've built so far. Welcome to the flight deck of the A220. So we're going to quickly go over the cold and dark startup, go through some cockpit flows, general operating procedures, and then we're going to head on over for a quick circuit around Dubrovnik. So without further ado, let's go over the overhead panel, and we're going to turn on battery 1 and battery 2, and that should initialize our FCP displays and CTP on either side of the cockpit and the ISI. As you can see the master caution light flashing away there, and we're going to crop in over to DU2. As you guys can see, the CAS starts initializing, so does a PFD, starts in a reverted state, and then moves over to DU1, which should happen any second. There we go. And unlike other airliners, you guys might notice that the IRS is automatically aligning. We're not cranking knobs on the overhead like an A320 or a 737, so it's very different and advanced airliner. So we're going to connect the external power by pressing a veil here. And once that's in, we're going to see everything else come to life. So within a few short moments, all the displays usually initialize, and then we can get on with setting up the aircraft. And after a few short moments, as you guys can see, we have all our displays active. We're going to start by putting the checklist on DU2, which is display unit 2 right here, by pressing checklist on the glare shield. And as you guys can see, the A220's checklist is very comprehensive. So we first have the summary page, which lists the immediate checklist items that a pilot might have to complete. The normal checklist procedures, which are basically standard on every A220. So things you might expect from other airliners, you know, power on, pre-flight, before start, before taxi. Non-normal, which covers situations in either emergency failures, emergencies, or other non-normal situations. So for example, we can access, let's say, the electrical battery 2 fail checklist and the associated procedures with that. And then lastly, we have the procedures tab, where these are all airline specific procedures, so this is tied to your livery. The procedures tab here actually details airline specific procedures. The one that we have here pertains to Swiss Airlines, as that's the livery that we're flying today. So let's head on over to summary, and we're going to click power on. And as you guys can see, a lot of these items are sensed in the A220's checklist. So you don't have to do something in the cockpit and go back here and check it off that you've done it. The aircraft actually senses the position of these knobs in the cockpit and actually auto ticks them off. So that's pretty handy. So ECL is on DU2, which is correct. The electronic checklist is on display 2. We can check that off. And we're going to set the hydraulic pumps as requested to auto. So that would be 3A, 3B, and 2B. And that's done. We're going to head back down, and we're going to make sure external power is connected as required, or APU. We have external power right now, so we can check that off as well. So let's go to pre-flight and head on down here, check all these off. I'm going to set the altimeter with the SimBrief, and that's already set. and center panel checked, pedestal size 6, everything is checked, and that's complete. So for our before start checklist, we're going to start this after our FMS setup. So we're going to head on over to the EFB. So the A220 has full SimBrief integration, so we are able to get a SimBrief uplink into the EFB here as well through the import from SimBrief button, and that has loaded my pre-planned route for the circuit here. And we can also go into the FMS. So in the A220 you can basically place any of these formats on any display, except the displays where we have the active PFD. So I can either throw the FMS down here, which is already active, or I could have it all the way up here as well, so it's easier for me to plan. So I can go to FMS here, I can go to flight plan, go to flight plan uplink, make sure my SimBrief ID is entered, and I can click send. And that uplink goes directly into your secondary flight plan. So into your secondary flight plan we go, and as you guys can see, we have the origin and destination airport and any pertaining legs that have been imported. So for this very short circuit, obviously it doesn't import sits or stars, it's just the waypoints in between, and that's only Bevis right here. So we're gonna go here, activate secondary, and move it over to our active flight plan. And once that's done, you can see our CDI come alive here. To kind of help us plan this flight better, I'm going to move the ICAS over to the first officer side, which can be done by going over to the pedestal, and we can swap the display reversions. So once that's done, the ICAS is over on the other side, and I'm being prompted to select a new format. So we're going to click right on the inboard display and click map. And as you guys can see, now it's very easy for me to just hop in here and start planning away. I can put in departure, arrival, and see it update on the map in real time. So let's go ahead and set up our departures and arrivals. So we're going to do a departure out of runway 29, and we're going to choose a departure there, and we're going to do an arrival of RNAV 29, select our transition, and the star right here as per our flight plan on SimBrief. So I'm going to execute that, and as you guys can see, the circuit looks a little messy here and needs a little bit of cleaning up. So I'm just going to pinch in on the map using the range knob, and in the plan mode what I can actually do is delete waypoints directly from the flight plan here. So I can delete away and clear up any unwanted waypoints, or I can go directly into the route page and clear them from here as well. So I can go into here, find the waypoints that I don't want, and clear, delete as well. And we can start clearing discontinuities as well, and there we go. If there is a waypoint after a waypoint that's already on the flight plan, it actually forces you to select your constraint. So we're going to select our constraint there and delete our duplicate waypoint. So as you guys can see, we've drawn our circuit here. It's all complete and looking good to go without any discontinuities. So under the route tab, we also have other pages that show us more information regarding our flight plan. We have the VI2, which is very similar to other airliners. We have the position report, which will give us information on our metrics at each waypoint, and we also have flight log, which will populate as we fly the aircraft and we pass the waypoints. It will start logging information such as fuel on board at a certain waypoint and more information, as we will see later on in the video. So we're going to go over to the EFB to do our FMS performance. So we can click SimBrief import, which will load in our values here, and we can click load aircraft. That's as seamless as that, and the aircraft is now loaded with the right amount of fuel, and the weights are all loaded as well. So we're going to go over to flight plan, fuel, and we're going to enter our zero fuel weight and CG, and that'll calculate our VNAV performance. So we're going to do 47.35 tons and 25.3 as our CG. So we're going to do 47.355 kg. Click that in there, and we're going to do 25.3. And once that's done, as you guys can see, VNAV is now able to populate our VSD with our vertical path data, and we can scroll out to kind of see it dotted, and once we press exec, that's all solid and now concrete and firm. So now that we have our weight and balance done and our fuel inputted, the aircraft is able to calculate the vertical path because we now have given it its performance data. So we can also enter a number of packs, which is retrieved from SimBrief here, 97. We can type that in, and we can head on over and do our takeoff performance. So in the performance page, you guys can see that there's fields such as flex, OAT, runway wind. It's very much a combination of what you expect from Airbus and Boeing aircraft. The UI kind of looks like a Boeing, but some of the terminology here kind of sounds like Airbus. All in all, it's a very, very interesting and quirky plane. So for FMS departure performance, we have a calculator for that in the EFB as well. So we're going to head on over to the EFB and head to the takeoff performance calculator, where we're able to sync the FMS information that was selected. So it knows that we're at runway 29 for departure, sync weather, and we can click calculate. So we're just going to do a standard PAX on flaps 2 departure out of Dubrovnik. The A220 is able to do anywhere between flaps 2 and flaps 4. Forced departure depending on runway length and other circumstances. And as you guys can see, it's selected our D rate to be TO-2, V1 is 123, VR is 128, and V2 is 133. We're going to send that to our FMS here, and the data will auto-populate in the FMS. So we're going to arm the APR and set these speeds. And as you guys can see, those numbers are now populating on the PFD. Furthermore, we're able to select other options on the performance page as well. So we're going to do our bleed source to be engine for departure, and we're going to do a departure profile of NADP, which basically lets us select our acceleration altitude and thrust reduction altitude. So I'm going to do 3,500 here, and I'm going to do 1,500 for our thrust reduction altitude, and you can see that update on the VSD accordingly, which is pretty cool. The A220 is very different and interesting in the fact that you have to actually press toga to arm your takeoff modes. So that can be done by pressing this hotkey on the glare shield, which we've conveniently bound to the screw under the CPDLC buttons, or you guys can bind toga to a peripheral button, either on your joystick or your keyboard in the sim settings, or you can press the toga buttons directly behind the throttle levers. So I'm going to use this bind on the glare shield right here, which is the screw. We're going to press that, and as you guys can see, we now have TO flashing on the PFD with our pitch target marker active. So we're going to press VNAV and NAV, so basically arming our LNAV system and our VNAV system. Our cruise altitude is set correctly on the FCP right here, and we're going to move the speed over to FMS and clear the message here. And once that's done, we're going to go back onto checklist here to do our before start checklist. So departure briefing is complete, APU is not started, so external power as nav as required, seatbelts on, and that should be sensed automatically as well. We're going to start our APU and then turn on our beacon. So that can be done by cranking the APU knob to the start position, and that will spring back to run. Here on the status Synaptic page, which can be accessed by pressing Syn on the inboard display controls, and as you guys can see, our RPM has hit 100% and the APU is now on, as depicted by the ICAS message, and we can go ahead and turn off our external power and turn on the beacon light. So that will automatically disconnect our external power and remove the shocks as well, which we can verify through the EFB. And once that's done, there we go, everything's disconnected. And we can proceed with the rest of the checklist for before start and park and brake as required. So as we prepare for departure here, we're just going to do a bit of housekeeping items. So we're going to set emergency lights to arm and turn on our windshield heats. Logo lights come on. Turn on our no Wi-Fi signs, and there we go. Crank the lights up a bit. And we can head on down and switch the display formats to be more convenient for flight. So I'm going to move my ICAS back over to the cabin side, turn on our map, and then turn on our terrain radar. So as we start pushing back from the gate, we're going to start the engine start procedure. So it's as simple as making sure your APU is running, which means now we have APU bleed supplying bleed air to the engines. We're going to go down here, make sure the engine start knob is at auto, and we're going to crank the engine start switches. So the Pratt & Whitney engines have a motoring time before they go through the crank and ignition sequence, and that results in a pretty hefty wait time of each engine starting up at around 1:30 to 1:45 seconds. There we go, engine 1 is live, and it is now sipping fuel from the fuel system, and as you guys can see, it is now supplying power on the electrical system as well. So we're going to go ahead and start engine number 1. So now we have 2 good engine starts, so we can go ahead and finish the rest of the before taxi procedure. So we're going to go to the overhead, make sure our APU is now turned off. The taxi lights are now on narrow. Everything else looks good. We're going to bring our checklist back up on DU2. So let's get that over. And APU as required. ATIs, we're not using that for our current departure flaps as selected, so we're going to do flaps 2. And set that down to flaps 2. And as you guys can see, the indication of the ICAS is alive. And we're going to do a quick flight controls check. So over to the right side, where I have the flight control synaptic page open, and we're going to full right, full left, full up, and full nose down as well, and test our rudder. And everything looks good. The A220 also features a very comprehensive radio system, so you can either tune your radios through the CTP right here, which is a very small display that lets you control your frequencies and other parameters, so I can go in here and manually tune in my frequencies, or I can open the full-sized CNS page, and that will let me control frequencies for my VHF 1, VHF 2, navigation frequencies, and my TCAS as well. So let's quickly set up our TCAS, even though we're not flying with traffic. It's nice to have that going, so we're going to do a flight ID of Synaptic 001. Let's do TARA above below. And one thing about the 220 is if you're, let's say, flying on VATSIM or any other online network, it makes it really easy for you to tune into any frequency of your choice. So I can look at the airport frequencies for any airport that I'm flying to. Currently it has my departure and arrival. And as you guys can see, it has the frequencies auto-populated. We're also able to edit and add our own frequencies to this, so this could be, let's say, 2. Yeah, that's pretty cool. As we start taxiing away from the gate, you will be able to notice the very famous A220 Howl sound that we've implemented. So take a listen. Alright, for takeoff, we're just going to set our throttles up to 50%, let them stabilize, and the auto throttle system will engage them around 70% of our N1 target to bring them up to the N1 target automatically. There was a Howl once again, and now stabilize, push it all the way, and there we go, auto throttle is green, thrust is active, speed is armed. The A220 automatically applies elevator downforce on takeoff, so you don't actually have to pitch down using your side stick, which is very convenient. Slowly pitch up over to the pitch target markers. And off we are. So I'd like to take this time now to talk about the speed trim system on the A220. So obviously this is not an Airbus, it doesn't fly like a 320 or any other Airbus aircraft. So what we have here is a blue bug on the PFD, which if you see on the speed tape, can be adjusted by the trim switch on your side stick. So let's say I want the plane to target speed of 150. So the nose is automatically coming down in order to speed up and maintain 150. So the plane did all of that. I did not touch the pitch whatsoever using my stick. So let's say I want to move it all the way up to like F1. And the aircraft will again pitch down to maintain that new speed trim speed. So it works very similar to like a modern Boeing aircraft, kind of like a 787, except you actually see the speed trim bug on your PFD. And in accordance with auto throttle, the best way to use speed trim is to always go plus or minus 2 or 3 knots. So always stay within the speed bug as you're making speed changes in manual flight. So right now we're going to target back onto 143 as per the FMS speed. And let's not go too much off course here. Let's turn our autopilot back on and let LNAV and VNAV handle guidance. So the plane will fly right back to its path. And there we go, VFLC is now active, so that's our managed climb speed. Sorry, not climb speed, our managed climb mode for the A220. So we have an array of climb modes such as FLC, vertical speed, FPA, etc. Very similar to that like of a Boeing or a Bombardier plane, as this is a Bombardier plane originally. And all the VNAV system does is basically visually puts a V in front of the pitch mode and then controls the associated pitch mode to reach the VNAV target. So if I was on VVS, for example, I could do a VVS climb and then it would vertical climb in that vertical speed mode until it reaches the altitude selected on the FCP, which should be 12,000, not 9,000, as that's our cruise. There we go. It's fine. So we're going to go back on the FLC, and when it reaches around 1,000 feet before 12,000, it goes into VALT cap, and then we'll switch to VALT and then VALT. So let's talk a little bit about graphical flight planning on the A220. So let's expand this map all the way. So what I can basically do is, let's say I'm flying on VATSIM and I have instructions from a controller to hold at a future waypoint. So I can just go into plan, I can go into, let's do Delta Uniform 701. Let's do hold, and the hold dialog pops up on the screen itself, and it previews the hold that I would be taking. I could do, for example, I could switch the direction, I could type in /L, which would flip the hold to the other side. I could adjust the hold speed. Let's say I want to hold at, let's say, 275 knots, so the circle is going to be bigger. So I'm just going to type in 275, put that in, and that goes bigger. I want to adjust the leg time to be 3 minutes on the leg, and that will extend the hold accordingly. So super cool stuff, and this can be done sequentially with other waypoints as well. I can add another hold to a future waypoint. I could do one like here. The graphical flight planning system on the A220 is just amazing. I can also update constraints on the VSD for the VNAV system. So let's say I want to be at, let's say 8,000 at Delta Uniform 701. Let's do that. Let's do crossing at or above 7,000. And what that's done essentially is, as it's changed our VNAV target to basically be at 7,000 or above at Delta Uniform 701. I can make a more aggressive crossing change. So let's say go back in there, I could do, let's say 5,000 at. And right now that's completely pushed our TOD back, as we're not going to meet that target. So the graphical flight planning system on the A220 is very comprehensive. The possibilities are amazing. It makes flight planning mid-flight so much easier, as everything's on the fly on the map in front of you. While we're cruising, what I can also do is adjust the angle of the vertical pad. So for example, let's say I want to push TOD further away from me. What I can do is go into the FMS, into descent, I can adjust the VPA angle. I could do, like for example, a steeper 4-degree glide, and that will push my TOD all the way forward to about 12 miles out, which is pretty cool. I'm going to put that back where it was, as it's already a pretty tight approach as we make that turn on those RF legs. So, and now the FMS is prompting me to check my altitude selector, and TOD is armed. So we're gonna go reset that down all the way to 000, as there's no ATC restrictions on this descent here, and we're doing an RNAV all the way down. So it'll be pretty cool to see. There we go, the aircraft is now descending on the managed glide path after overflying that as it recaptures the path. And we will add some spoilers, because the A220 is a very, very slippery plane. So some spoilers out as we get down to 250 from our cruise speed of 275. And as we make our descent, it's probably best to do our descent checklist. So let's go down to the checklist here that's already open and go into summary. Let's do descent and approach. FMS set minimums is going to be 1620 for this approach. So we're going to tune menu and PFD nav. Let's go into Barrow and put 1620 in there. And that's good. And we'll go back down, check that off. Auto brake as required. We'll do auto brake medium as it's a pretty short runway. Bycast checked and arrival briefing is complete. So we'll complete that. So as this is an RNAV approach, you will see that we have a waypoint here that's marked with FAF. So basically FAF is our final approach fix. And for that, the A220 will enter a vertical mode named VGP. So VGP is essentially vertical glide path, VNAV glide path, and that will fly the aircraft at a much higher precision for the vertical star, and it will follow this star aggressively regardless of speed or track error. So we're gonna press approach here, and that will arm VGP when appropriate, and that will also put FMS1 into approach mode. As we pass decel here, the FMS speeds will also update to be much lower to match our flap speeds for approach. So we'll go into arrivals here and make sure we have +5 on our VREF. As we're landing with auto throttle, it's always recommended to add some extra speed to VREF on the A220, even in real life, as the FADEC is not exactly the best with the auto throttle and maintaining the speed on approach, especially if it's gusting or if there's some winds. As you guys can see, we have now entered the RF leg on this approach, and it is flying that absolutely bang on. The A220 does not render the path under 2 miles, as you guys can see, and the closest we can get to see it tracking the path is at 2 miles, which is pretty tight. And the RNP on this leg is 0.3, and we're obviously well within it. So the A220's LNAV system with regards to RNP and LPV approaches is pretty amazing. Quickly referencing our before landing checklist, altimeter is all set and cross-checked, and landing gear is now down. Put that down, flap indicating, and cabin is ready, so we'll complete that. There we go. As we've now approached our FAF, VGP has now taken over VPath, and we are in the final approach for Pushback. On final approach here, you guys can see the different FMA modes we have. Speed, upper FMS1, VGP is active, minimums are set, and we've just crossed minimums actually, and RMP approach on the HSI. So let's go ahead and land the plane. And flying it is very, very easy. It's very easy on the controls. Minimal inputs go a long way. Speed trim is set to the our VRF over there, and auto throttle is handling that, obviously with that +5 offset that we set in the FMS earlier. And as we fly over the threshold, you will see retard arm under speed, and that will essentially idle the throttles automatically before touchdown. Firm there, but it's fine, we made it down.
Okay, let's take a look at the EFB and the functions that go with it, along with some functions on the terrain radar. So looking back down at the EFB, it's a pretty cool little look. You know, you've got quite a nice 3D model here. You've got one for the captain and one for the first officer, and they are both independently run. Not going to labour the point too much with this, so we'll open and close some pages fairly quickly, but I do want to give you a quick overview so you know what you would get when you purchase the product. You have a My Flight section. Now this can be imported from SimBrief, and that obviously just shows you where we're going from, where we're going to, departure time, all the weather and things like that. And this is where you would view your flight plan, and this has come from SimBrief as well. Really cool. You can obviously just view it inside and have a look at all the information that you want, SID, stars, all that sort of stuff. That's about it. You've got all the other information on there, kind of makes sense. Ground equipment. This is where fairly self-explanatory, opening, closing doors, attaching jetways, attaching ramps, toggling catering, and you've got a pretty cool thing here with the cabin lighting. Now, this means that you can actually adjust the cabin lighting to different colors. Quite a few operators of the 220 do have a really colorful, interesting cabin, so this is where you can control that as well. Load sheet, fairly explanatory again. Can import from SimBrief. Once you click that, all goes in there. At the moment, obviously, I've got it set to pounds, but that's a configurable option that we'll look at in a minute. Load it in, and this is where it will show you your zero fuel weight and your current weight. So these are the options that you'll be typing into the flight plan fuel page for the FMS to initialize itself. Takeoff performance, you again have an option to sync weather, sync everything like this. This is pulls the actual weather. That's the live weather, so obviously if you're using custom weather you need to make sure to set that, and you can calculate it here and it will give you your speeds. Now what's a little bit different to a standard Airbus, it's takeoff derate thrust settings here, so takeoff 1, takeoff 2, takeoff 3 and all that sort of stuff, which you can set inside the FMS as well, so just be aware of that. And it shows us sort of our basic information that kind of makes sense. Remember, minimum takeoff flap is flaps 2, not 1, so 1 is only approach flap setting. Again, it's an Airbus, but not like you know it. Landing performance, fairly explanatory, same sort of thing. You can in-brief the airports, put it in, it's going to give you a stopping distance, so you can kind of figure out what flap setting do I need. A little bit of discussion about the flap settings is you've obviously got, I'm going to call it one extra, okay, so flaps 5 is one more setting than you get in a normal Airbus, but think of it like an extra setting. So what do I mean by that? Well, in a normal Airbus, so an A320, 330, you can land in config 3 and config full, and that's fine. Now, whereas on the 220, sort of your normal landing is actually config 4, so flaps 4 and flaps 5. You can use it, by all means, right? It's up to you. There's no sort of limitations of not to use it, but it generally is only used on the really shorter runways and really when you need it. So it's kind of an, and I'm putting air quotes in here, abnormal flap setting, but here you can see the sort of distance that it makes. It makes quite a bit of difference to the approach speed, but it's again one of those unique features that the 220 can get in and out of places where the 320 just can't. So that's where all the information for that is shown. Charts, fairly explanatory again. You have got your charts available to you. You've got both Navigraph charts and you've also got the Lido charts that draw straight from the sim. Of course, for the Navigraph charts, you do require a Navigraph subscription. Settings, aircraft settings. This is where obviously we're choosing what we want in terms of kilos, imperials, IRS landing time. The auto disconnect is sort of toggling with the beacon and all this sort of stuff. And the weathering. Now, weathering is a cool one. This is obviously how dirty the outside of the aircraft looks, and this can be scaled to what you like, because some people want a factory fresh aircraft and some people want an aircraft that's been really well used. That gives you the option to set that there. The EFB settings, now this is an interesting one and is worth discussing, is there's a lot of typing in you do on these FMSs, and what they've enabled here, which is really cool, is you can actually set your own keybind. So I've set it to B, you can set it to whatever you want, and when you press B, your keyboard then becomes the input for the FMS, so then you can type in KPVD, put it in, put it in, and it sort of speeds up that entry process. But do remember, when you're in that data entry mode, you get a little circle that goes around the cursor to show you that that's enabled, but you're locked out of all the other parts of the aircraft because the sim can't simultaneously do that. So that's why it's a toggleable option, and you can set it to whatever you want. Call out settings, I don't think I need to explain much on that. You can toggle whatever you want on and off. Here as well, this is where you're putting in your usernames, IDs, logging in and out of Navigraph, and choosing between the default nav data, which will work in this aircraft, and also Navigraph. Bit of a whirlwind tour of the EFB there, but that kind of shows you the features that you can expect when you pick up the aircraft. Now let's take another little bit of a discussion about this terrain radar. Now, as we said before, it is a really cool piece of kit, but also quite intensive. So that's why this has to be launched as an external program and piped back into the simulator. So you're going to have to make sure that an external program is running when you're using the aircraft to allow this terrain radar to function. Just as a heads up, if you're having problems with it or it's not working, just that's part of that, and there'll be supporting documentation and information to go on that with release. That about sums up the 220. Thank you very much for watching, and we do hope that you get your hands on the 220 and experience the most non-Airbusy Airbus around. It's a great addition to your fleet. You can go all over the world, ops everywhere, and it's only an aircraft platform that's expanding and getting more and more routes as time goes on. Thank you very much.